Well, here we are. I told you I wasn't bluffing. First video outside of Miami. I'm over here in the Villages. I'm walking right next to Lake Sumter. Stayed at this hotel last night right behind me, the Waterfront Inn. And I decided to stop here because it was kind of like a 4.5 hour drive from Miami. And you know, they have this beautiful lakeway to walk around here. So I'm gonna do something different for you guys today. I'm gonna walk around this lake for like half of the video, give you some nice water views of this area. And then the second half, I'm gonna head over to one of the nearby neighborhoods and hopefully we can see some houses for sale that are a lot more affordable than what we see in Miami. Now, I saw something today that I just had to talk about. And it's not something that I would typically talk about on the channel, but it is becoming such a huge problem. And now that I'm on the road, it's becoming very apparent as well. Now that I have to stop at different restaurants and places and buy things more regularly than I do at home, it seems like everywhere you go today, people want a tip, right? Tip. Tip for this, tip for that, tip for getting a coffee, tip at the restaurant, tip at the hotel, tip for placing an order somewhere, self-checkout, whatever. Tip, 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 tip. So here's a tip for you. You don't actually have to tip everywhere. Did you know that? I came across this story today talking about tipping etiquette, okay? And when you should be tipping and when you don't have to tip, when you don't have to feel obligated or forced to give a tip, because now everybody has one of those handheld tablets at checkout and they push it in your face and automatically give you the option to give an 18, 20, or 25% tip in many cases. And depending on what you're buying, that can be absurd. And I've already seen that a couple times here on my trip. And, you know, it's just insane, guys. Like, things that we never used to tip for, people are expecting to get a tip for now. Now, this advice comes from a guy who calls himself Mr. Manners. He's basically an expert when it comes to different types of etiquette, which I certainly am not, which you guys probably already know if you're a regular of my channel. And you know, the crazy thing about this right now is that everyone's having a hard time with inflation. Everyone's feeling the effects of how much everything is costing. And this just adds extra pressure for you to spend even more money than you thought you were going to on things, and it's starting to take a toll on people. The first category of people you shouldn't feel obligated to tip to is obviously if you're going to the bank or you're going to the doctor, lawyers, teachers, any type of professional service where somebody gets a regular salary for their work or they charge you by the hour, things like that. You should not feel obligated to tip. You know, the first thing that came to mind when I read that was like, well, what happens when you hire like a plumber or a handyman that comes over to do a certain job, right? They might charge a flat fee, maybe they charge by the hour, and sometimes you might feel obligated to give someone like that a tip. Well, you don't actually have to, but you know, I feel like it's one of those things where it's case by case basis. If they were super cool, went above and beyond, and you know, you really feel like they did the job well, better than probably anybody else would, then sure, maybe they deserve a tip if you feel like giving one. It's not necessary, but it's something that you could do as a kind gesture if you feel like it. And by the way, if you're wondering why it's so empty out here, is because it is even hotter than Miami out here. I'm not even kidding, guys. It is scorching. Definitely over 100 degrees. I was hoping I'd see some gators. You know, I never see gators when I'm on the road in Florida ever, so I don't see anything. Now, this one to me is the most controversial one, and this is the one that I get hit with all the time, especially in Miami, and probably I will on this road trip too, is counter service. So when you're going someplace and you're ordering food at the counter, think of like McDonald's or other type of fast food restaurant, or something where you just go in, you order, take it out, right? You're doing everything yourself. You're not getting delivery, you're not doing anything like that. You're just going in, ordering, and leaving. Starbucks, whatever, right? Well, according to Mr. Manners, tipping is not a requirement in this situation, okay? So you should not feel obligated to tip, even though they always ask for tips in these situations. You shouldn't feel like you have to. But say if you go to the place regularly and, you know, they have your order memorized and you have a good relationship with somebody at the counter, sure, give them a nice tip if you feel like it. Or, you know, they got your order ready super fast and they were just super friendly and maybe you weren't having a good day and they put a smile on your face, go ahead, give them a tip, guys. Like, there's no rules at the end of the day of who you can and cannot tip. But the whole point of this is you shouldn't feel obligated to give people extra money just because it's an option and it looks like they're expecting that from you. And I recently had a situation where I thought about this for a minute because I had a pizza delivered, right? Uber Eats sent me a coupon, and I never use Uber Eats, but they gave me a $25 coupon to use. So I'm like, all right, that's roughly the cost of a pizza, right? So I ordered a pizza and the total ended up being $30-something, right? With all of Uber's fees and delivery charges and all of this. So I only had to pay a few bucks out of my own pocket using their coupon. But then I started thinking, if I went in to go pick up that pizza myself, I will guarantee you that the person at the counter would give me the option to give them a tip, right? But since I didn't go in person and pick up that pizza, the Uber driver did. And do you think the Uber driver went up there and gave that person a tip? I don't think so. But the Uber driver got a tip because he delivered the food to my house, right? So the person who performed the delivery actually received the tip, which makes sense, right? But if I would have went to the restaurant and picked up that pizza myself, then I would have been hit with that prompt, that same kiosk, like, hey, you want to give a 15-20% tip to the cashier? Like, why? Why should I, guys? Like, you didn't do anything for me besides charge me money. Now you want to charge me more money? So I feel like it's one of those situations where if you're going to a place you're just taking out, you should not feel obligated to tip. And by the way, guys, I'm a generous tipper. I have no problem tipping for good service. And in many of those situations, I do actually give a small tip. If I'm doing takeout, maybe I'll give $1 or $2 many times. But now I'm starting to change my mind that maybe I shouldn't, because if I got it delivered, that person wouldn't get a tip. So what do you guys think about that? Now, the next one they say you don't have to feel obligated to tip at is an open bar event. If you go to some kind of networking event and there's an open bar, or maybe somebody's wedding, you shouldn't feel obligated to tip the bartender. Yeah, if it's really busy and they were still kind to you and remembered to give you your order exactly as you asked for it and things like that, then sure, go ahead and give a tip. Once again, you just shouldn't feel obligated to. Now, the next one, which I'm so glad made it onto this list, is double tipping, okay? And basically what that is when you go to a restaurant and the tip is included, okay? They automatically include the tip on your bill. However, when you actually get the bill at your table, a lot of times they will give you the option to add an additional tip, even though they already have a minimum 18% service charge or whatever it is. Definitely don't feel obligated to tip extra in those circumstances. Once again, it's one of those things where, yeah, if they did a fantastic job and you feel generous and you want to give extra, go for it. But definitely don't feel like you have to. I certainly don't in those situations pretty much ever. In fact, I kind of like it when the tip is included, so I don't have to think about tipping the person. And the only time I would ever complain about something like that, which I never have, is if the service was absolutely horrendous and the person didn't deserve an 18% tip, for example. But luckily that's never happened to me. This can also happen when you're getting your nails done, maybe if you're getting a massage done, things like that. You'll often run into these situations where you might be prompted to double tip, so to speak. And this one on the list is my favorite. Poor service, guys. If you don't get treated well at any type of establishment that usually requires you to give some sort of a tip, that's a situation where you shouldn't feel obligated to tip. And like I said, I'm normally a generous tipper, but there have been a few circumstances in the past where I've left a server little to nothing because they were just so rude, so unattentive, and made the whole experience of going out to eat absolutely miserable. And I'm not kidding, sometimes it can be really bad. And it's like, why are you even doing this? Because, you're not gonna last very long at a job like that. If you're gonna work in that type of job, you need to have the personality for it, just like anything else. Which is great why I'm not in real estate anymore. I have the personality to be here on YouTube, talking to you guys, not out trying to sell houses and hope for a commission, Now, my wife really has a lot to say about this, and I wish she would join me for this part of the video, but she doesn't want to. but she used to be a server for many years. And every time that I come up with a situation where I feel like I should give the server less or whatever because of this or that, she's like, oh, well, you know, they need the money, and always trying to come up with excuses of why I should give them extra, right? Even if I don't feel like they deserved it. So actually most of the pressure from tipping more going out to eat comes from my wife, not from the restaurant. But Mr. Manners says that if you're not going to tip someone, or at the very least give them way less than you normally would because the service is bad, then you should definitely make management aware of the situation and let them know that, hey, yeah, this wasn't very good. The management might be able to help you out with something as well, as far as a discount or something to make you feel better. And also, you have to look at what actually went wrong if you're at a restaurant. Like if the food didn't come out exactly how you wanted it, you know, you ordered it not spicy, it came out spicy, that might be the kitchen's fault, right? So not something that you want to give your server less money for. Or say, for example, the people inside were loud, you just didn't like the environment of the restaurant, it was overall a bad experience in that regard. You know, that's also not the server's fault either, and also not grounds for giving somebody less. You know, really, it comes down to that person. How well did they treat you? You know, how often they come over to top off your drink and ask if everything is okay, and make sure that, you know, you have another beer when you want it and all of that. That's the one thing that drives me crazy. Like if I'm at a restaurant and, you know, I'm drinking a beer or having a glass of wine and I want a second one, I want it while I'm having my food, guys, not afterwards. And sometimes they won't come and ask to get another one. And it's really stupid if you ask me, because they're lowering the amount of the check that would actually be in the end of the amount that they would actually get tipped on to begin with. And also they're kind of lowering their tip in the sense that they didn't take care of me exactly how I wanted to be. So, you know, it might not entice me to give them anything extra, just the standard 18%, you know? And that's the other thing too, like what is the standard now? Like I remember when I was a kid going to restaurants that usually the standard tip back in the day was 15%, right? And then it kind of crept up to 18%. And nowadays, it seems like 20% is more the standard. That seems like almost the minimum that you should tip these days, and above and beyond that for better service. So it kind of is getting out of hand. It gets to the point where if you're tipping this much, when does it even make sense to go out to eat anymore? Because you're gonna end up paying just as much in tips as your actual cost of your meal and everything. So at some point it just doesn't make sense anymore. And by the way, yesterday was the 4th of July and this whole area was happening. I'll show a little bit of B-roll footage of that for you guys so you can get a sense of what was going on. They had like a whole little county fair going on in here. It was pretty neat. And I was able to meet one of my subscribers just out of the blue over here that said that they just moved here to the Villages. So that was pretty cool. So I'll put up that for you. And after this, we're gonna head over to the neighborhood. And just like that, movie magic, we are in one of the neighborhoods here in the Villages, and this house that you guys are looking at right behind me, you almost wouldn't even know it's for sale because they have a tiny little real estate sign inside the window there. This house is $399,000 and it's another flip. They bought it back in 2021 for around $330,000, something like that. Now they're trying to sell it for $399,000. So even flipping exists right here in the Villages, and I think I know why this house is so inexpensive, because it seems like the houses on this block have basically no yard. Like they're very compact. Like you're literally right next to your neighbor here. Maybe there's a tiny little outdoor space in the back, but not much. And a lot of the other houses around here in this little neighborhood seem to go for more in the $500,000 to $600,000 range. But I wanted to bring you guys here because I always get so many complaints like, oh, show us some affordable stuff. Well, here you go, guys. 400 grand, median home price throughout the entire country, right here in Florida, in the Villages, in Retirement Central. So, and by the way, If you're enjoying this video so far, please make sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. I'm going to have a lot more videos like this as I'm hitting the road here. And even though this video is not totally centered around real estate, I always want to throw something in there that has to do with real estate and get back to my roots here and walking the neighborhood, guys, and just showing you something different. So I want to take the opportunity to just take you around this neighborhood here and see how it looks. I see this one's for rent. Now, I'm not sure what's going on with this house. They said it was for rent. There's a for rent sign in the window, but if you look closely at this listing photo from back in 2016, that same for rent sign was still in the window. So maybe they just forgot to take it down all these years. I don't know. But it was for rent at one point, but the current owner of this house paid $285,000 for it back in 2016, and the current property tax bill is $3,000 a year, which looks like nothing compared to the property tax bills we see over in Miami. I was even curious about that, if the villages allowed like real estate signs in the yard, the typical poles that you see out there, but it looks like they probably don't, because that's already two listings right there. They just have the small sign inside the window. So looks like they probably don't allow that here. Now let's get back to the tipping situation to figure out what is going on with this. Like, why all of a sudden is the tipping so far out of control right now? Well, the number one thing that it's being blamed on right now is the pandemic, because people started tipping people more than usual as a way to show gratitude for being out during the pandemic and doing deliveries and things like that. People who still were forced to come into work. You know, you had like two classes of people during the pandemic, where you had the stay-at-home crowd that could do everything from home, and the people that still had to go out and risk it and work every day. And tipping became more of like an expected thing, right? Like, people started tipping more because of this situation, but now that a lot of that is largely over with, it has now still carried over into the culture of today, where people are expected to tip everybody, even though you might have to be out going back to work yourself. You know, if you work at a service business and you're expected to tip people when you go out, I mean, you're using the money that you're getting in tips to try and tip somebody else. So now the next big reason, which I think is probably the largest push of why this is happening so far, is what they call the technological nudge. And that is basically the screen, guys. Everybody gets prompted with the tablet nowadays, where you go to pay, they swipe your credit card, and before you actually sign digitally with your finger, you give the option to give an extra tip. And especially if you're waiting in line somewhere and people behind you can see what you're doing, it puts like this social pressure on you, at least for some people, not for me, but some people might feel intimidated by that and feel obligated to tip in a situation where a lot of other people might be able to see how much you're tipping someone, or if you left a tip at all, and people feel intimidated by that. Or since, you know, it's automatically prompting you to do it, it seems like it's something that you just have to do, even though they do have a button on there many times for no tip or a custom tip. You know, right away you see options for 15, 18, 25%, whatever it is, automatically, and people just cave and they just pay, you know. In fact, we know that this is one of the main reasons that people feel obligated to tip, because they did a study on Uber and Lyft tips, and this is not something that is in your face. Like, people do this independently and privately on their own phone, and what they found out is that out of all the people that take Uber and Lyfts anywhere, only about 60% of them don't even leave a tip, and the ones who do leave a tip only tip between 5 and 10%. So when the tip is not forced right into your face, you know, in public, around other people, and kind of a high pressure situation where people are waiting in line, things like that, then people are way less likely to leave a tip, apparently. And if they do tip, it's a lot smaller. It's not 20%. So basically what they're doing is they're nudging you to give extra money. But you know who's really benefiting from all of this? These credit card processing companies, especially Square, because Square is in charge of processing all of these electronic transactions that you do on those tablets when they flip the screen over to you for you to give the tip and sign, they take a percentage, guys, when all these credit card transactions take place, and they take a percentage of the tip as well. So the entire total, they take a percentage of. So these guys are making extra money on this, and they have a huge incentive in order to basically get you to tip. And I just realized I walked in a big circle here, so unfortunately we're going to see the same block twice. So another big reason that you see so much of this tipping in your face, besides this huge push from these tablet companies and credit processing companies like Square, is the fact that a lot of these places that offer you to tip when you go pick up that coffee at Starbucks or you order takeout food somewhere, it's not just the credit processing companies that want you to tip, but it's also the restaurant themselves. Because think about this, the restaurants are not paying people what they need to in order to get people to work. Pretty much any restaurant you can walk into today, and you'll see hiring for all positions on the window. When I'm on the road and I go to different places, I'll be sure to take little shots of that and throw them in the videos for you guys in the future so you can see. I'm sure you've seen them yourself, but everybody's hiring everywhere. And one way that restaurants and places like this use to pay their workers more is to lean heavily on the tip system, where they're putting the tip in your face constantly and trying to get customers to tip more as a way to incentivize more employees to work there. Because if there's a tip system in place and there's a chance they can get paid more beyond their hourly wage, it's a way for the restaurant to pay people more without actually paying them more. So you're paying them more, you're picking up the slack as, basically acting as part of the employer process here. But it is getting out of hand, because I heard that there was a video recently of a guy from DoorDash, and he went to someone's door and he was delivering a pizza. The pizza was $20, okay? And the woman that was receiving the pizza gave him a $5 tip. Like, okay, that's not so bad. That's a 20% tip, right? But the guy went on to basically curse her out and said, whoa, wait a minute, this is a pretty nice house that you're living in for only a $5 tip. Basically insulting the woman, first of all, and then she just told him, you're welcome, and then the guy pretty much said, F you to the lady, which is terrible, I mean, how awful is that people are coming down to the point where they're telling people F you for not giving the tip that they were expecting to get. And by the way, what kind of tip are you expecting to get on a $20 pizza delivery, right? I can personally really relate to this one quite a bit, because I used to deliver pizzas for a couple years when I was younger. Shortly after I got my driver's license, that was one of my favorite jobs I ever had, actually, was pizza delivery. And even back then, guys, we're talking 2004, 2005 was around the time frame that I was doing this, so close to 20 years ago, 18 years ago, that I was a pizza delivery driver, and I was getting a $5 tip back then. But in reality, the price of pizza hasn't changed that much either. Like, a lot of the pizzas I was delivering were $25, $30 even back then. So in a way, pizza has gotten cheaper because of inflation, but the tip has also diminished because of inflation as well. So when I used to get a $5 tip, I would never complain or ever at anybody's tip. Sometimes I wouldn't even get a tip, right? But the place I worked for had a delivery charge. So I'd be guaranteed at least something on each delivery, and then a tip was beyond that the customer would give, right? When I got a $5 tip, I was happy to get a $5 tip. It wasn't like an amazing tip, but it wasn't a bad tip either, right? But nowadays, because of inflation, $5 is definitely not what it used to be 20 years ago. And I can see how somebody might not be happy with that tip, but at the same time, they're being extremely ungrateful, and it's not like the person under-tipped them, and you chose to be a delivery driver on top of that. You can't expect everybody to give you a fortune every time you show up at someone's doorstep. And then it's like, it also puts the customer in an awkward position, like, what are they supposed to do? If you're paying $20 for a pizza and you give the driver a $5 tip, that's already a 20% tip. What do they want? 10 bucks? That's already half the cost of your food. And it's getting out of hand to the point where maybe you might as well go pick it up yourself. Which leads me to tell you, I had an idea while I was planning this video that, one thing I think that these delivery apps should do for people is they should have an estimator tool on there telling you basically how much money and time you would save by getting this delivered versus going picking it up yourself. So if you wanted to go pick it up, how much time is it going to take you to get there and back home? How much gas money are you going to spend on that? And if you're going to tip the person at the front desk, right? The person at the counter, you're going to give them a tip. Also, that could be an optional part of it. These programs like DoorDash and Uber Eats, things like that, should have some sort of a algorithm in place where they can more or less estimate, hey, by getting this delivered to your house, you're saving X amount of dollars. Let's say you're saving $10, right? So that might incentivize people to give more of a tip, because mainly they save their time and energy to have to go do this, and the hassle of maybe sitting in traffic, and definitely saving the money on gas. And that should be like the bare minimum of how much someone should be tipped. And then if you like them and the service was good, then above and beyond that. But I think that's something that these apps should implement. What do you think? I hit another dead end over here. I'm basically at a cul-de-sac, but you can see just over in this area here, the houses are a lot nicer, but a lot bigger, not nearly as compact. It's still pretty small yards and stuff, but nothing like over there. These are probably more like the $600,000-$700,000 houses just right down the street from the $400,000 one we saw. Now DoorDash says that this person that told the woman F you has been fired and is no longer with DoorDash, and they claim that it's okay for drivers to politely ask for a tip, but it's definitely not okay to curse somebody out for not giving the tip that they desired. So that person has been let go. But it's not just our imaginations that tips are going through the roof right now. The payment processor Square that we were just talking about, that's making a fortune off of all this tipping, said that in the fourth quarter of 2022, tipping grew by 17% at full service restaurants compared to that same time frame a year earlier in 2021. And tip frequency at quick service restaurants like coffee shops and fast food places, things like that you probably shouldn't even have to tip at, also went up by 16% in that same period. So this whole phenomenon of feeling like you're tipping more is not fake. Like, it is not in your imagination. People are really tipping more right now, not always out of the kindness of their heart either. It's definitely being thrown in our face as something that you feel obligated to do because of whatever reason. And I wanted to make this video because it's something that I face quite a bit, and I'm gonna be facing quite a bit here on this trip, and I'm sure it's something a lot of you can relate to as well. And here's one more thing to confirm what we're just talking about, is that LendingTree did a survey, and they figured out that 60% of Americans felt that they were tipping more right now than ever before, and 24% of people said that they feel pressured to tip. So they actually feel like they need to do it, even if it's a situation that you typically wouldn't tip in. And 41% of people are actually changing their buying habits and how much money they're spending due to the amount of absurd tipping that's happening right now. And no surprise, 60% of people said that the tipping phenomenon has gotten completely out of hand, which I agree. So next time, think twice before you feel like you need to leave a tip. That's a tip for you. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you click the bell notification down below. YouTube will alert you every time I post a new video. And if you don't want to wait, check out my next one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.